So thank you for your attention. I'm conscious of not keeping you here all night, so I'd like to move along briskly and in an engaging way, hopefully, to get a reaction from everybody, and if one or two of you have questions, to bring them along. So Bernard, as a rugby player, what's your reaction now, having heard Dr. Omalu?
It was a brilliant presentation. Congratulations, and I admire your expertise and your passion for the subject. I was lucky enough to play rugby for 25 years, and I got involved when I retired in 2010 with Acquired Brain Injury Ireland to try and build awareness. I think it's very important that we understand the risk, but we also understand the potential rewards from team sports. As I said, I played for 25 years. My generation, my father's generation, my grandfather's generation got big benefits from playing the sport. And I think, you know, when you say, would you put a gun to your head and pull the trigger? Earlier on you spoke about would you give your child a cigarette? Would you put a helmet on and smash it off a wall? No, you wouldn't, because you know there's nothing to be gained from that. But in team sport, you spoke about how setbacks and disappointments help you become a successful person. I think my sport, rugby, does a huge amount in terms of improving self-confidence, improving respect for others, improving self-esteem, teamwork, commitment. There's health benefits from it. And there is a risk for sure, and we need to keep talking about that risk. And the IRFU have done great work in terms of education, accountability through coaches, referees, parents, across the game, to make sure we understand that concussion is a very, very serious injury. But from my point of view, my son plays rugby, he's 8. I understand, I've read a lot of stuff about it. It's a risk I'm willing to take on his behalf because I believe the benefits of the game outweigh the risk. And that's just my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but I believe it's a great sport, and we need to continually talk about the risk, but understand the benefits.
You though received a few concussions.
Yeah, absolutely. I retired because of concussion. You know, my team doctor felt that I was running the risk of having too many concussions. At the end of my career anyway. I understand that it's a serious issue. As a coach, my job is to teach my players the best technique possible. You know, American football, contact is sought sometimes. The game of rugby is to avoid contact. You know, there is contact, but we're not looking for contact. The good players avoid contact and keep the ball alive. So we're trying to, as coaches, avoid that risk as much as possible.
Yeah, but it's a contact sport, obviously.
Absolutely.
Were you concerned? Do you accept Dr. Omalu's?
100%. I don't. Yeah. He's a world expert on the subject.
Yeah.
But I do think rugby is a different sport than American football. You know, and as again I said, it's about helping build characters, build your personality, and I believe for young kids, rugby, along with all the other sports, team sports particularly are different in some aspect than individual sports, do help forge kids' characters and help them become, I suppose, better adults.
Okay, Dr. Pat O'Neill, as you know, a former player at the highest level and now involved in the medical side, from a GA point of view, what do you make of it?
Well, I think in Gaelic games the risk is somewhat less than in some of the other sports, particularly the field sports, but nonetheless it does exist there. From my own perspective, I came at it from the point of view of being a player who suffered concussions. I can't remember how many, but there weren't that many. Maybe that's the rationale. And of course, before you get to it, Des, I've also been accused of causing them as well, so we'll leave that out. In another life then, in terms of coaching and managing teams, it also became an issue because you had decisions you had to make there in relation to the players and keeping them on the field and keeping with the strategy and the tactics, and yet at the same time, in terms of player welfare, there had to be radical decisions that mightn't have been beneficial to the sport at the particular time. Right. And then I suppose in the third capacity, I tended as a medical practitioner, I tended to keep away from the head, and most of my work involved what was below the neck, essentially, which did not involve the brain. But at the same time, you know, we've had the concerns, particularly that have been highlighted by the controversies that have occurred, particularly coming from the forensic neuropathology, and also because of certain situations where players were not removed that maybe should have been removed. But I do think that the sporting organisations, and certainly in this country, have taken serious cognizance of it and are certainly very much up for modifying any rules and regulations and undertaking guidelines and recommendations for those involved, whether they're at all levels. It tends to be that only 5% of them become high profile, but this other 95% come in games that there's probably only a few people watching. So it's the high profile ones that make the headlines.
You have a grandchild playing now, have you?
I have two grandchildren playing actually.
Would you have any concerns?
One young girl and one young boy, so I wouldn't have any reservations really, provided that it's properly dealt with and managed and that the protections are built in there. But I really don't believe that refraining from participation in sport, and particularly our field sports or any sport, there is an indigenous risk, but I think the benefits far outweigh the risks that are involved. Maybe that doesn't apply to all sports, but certainly speaking for Gaelic games and to a lesser extent some of the other field sports in this country, I wouldn't have the major reservations that are expressed.
Yeah. Well, Aisling, you were involved in MMA along with Conor McGregor, and it's been very high profile in the last couple of years. What were the circumstances of you retiring from the sport?
I retired from the sport earlier this year. A routine brain scan basically showed up that I had a small abnormality, some evidence of a small hemorrhage that I'd had at some point in the previous year. So under doctor's advice then, it was just to not take any more head trauma. So I retired from the sport officially, and I also don't participate in regular style MMA training. So I don't spar or anything like that. I just focus on the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and grappling aspect of mixed martial arts. So there's a lot that I would agree with Bennet saying, particularly about the age of consent. I think children shouldn't really be put into a situation where they are taking head trauma before they're able to be aware of making that decision for themselves. I know right now in Ireland with mixed martial arts, 18 is the age for competing at an amateur level, and I know from coaching myself, I coach kids and teens, that we don't do any kind of full contact training with them in the gym. We focus on the grappling element of it, and then when it comes to striking or anything like that, the focus tends to be on pad work, bag work, on what we'd call schooling, where you use the boxing gloves to land the strikes and stuff like that. Maybe on occasion there will be something like light body sparring or kind of tip-tap sparring, but generally there's not really any contact. I think pretty much across the board for any sport the risk is there, so maybe the focus needs to be on each individual governing body recognising those risks instead of burying their head in the sand about it. There's no point, like, these risks are there, we should address them, we should try and implement protocols so that every sport is made to be as safe as possible for kids, teens, and then eventually the adults. And then when the adults are old enough to make their own decisions, then if they want to go into a high-risk sport, that's their own business. But definitely for the children, I think there should be softer rule sets. I know sometimes in soccer they're not allowed to head the ball until they're a certain age, and maybe in terms of rugby they can go through more skill-based stuff and avoid tackles, kind of more like tag rugby or something like that. But obviously I can only speak about my own sport, and I know we're working really hard to get it regulated and to implement these things. Learning a lot as something like today, we need to implement these things. The more we know, the more we can fix problems that are current and prevent them from happening long term. So I just have to agree, definitely 18 is a good age for high contact, high collision sports. Adults can make their own decisions.
Well, on that, we heard your views on rugby. Professor O'Byrne, who's the FAI surgeon, which is our football association, our soccer association, sorry. Well, I asked you earlier, we spoke earlier, and I asked you about soccer because I thought it might be the least physical of the main field sports we have here. And you feel strongly about soccer as well. Just could you sum it up in a moment before we get John's reaction? I'm asking you about just in terms of the risks of soccer.
For soccer, like now in the United States, you can't head the ball till you're, I think it's 11. But I think heading should be taken out of amateur soccer, 18. Because again, the scientific literature has proven that heading the ball causes acceleration, deceleration injuries of the brain. When you become an adult, you could make an adult choice. I do not believe a parent should be making such decisions for a child. A parent who smokes does not make his or her child smoke. The law does not allow that. So if we wouldn't allow a child smoke a stick of cigarette, why would we then allow a child to suffer traumatic brain injury, which is more serious? A stick of cigarette or a massive blow to your head. We all need to answer that. Now, but for soccer, so no heading below the age of 18. And if you notice, soccer is a game that involves very high levels of dexterity, visual spatial coordination, and visual muscular coordination. Children under the ages of 12, 14 do not have such neurological capacity. They are children. And when you watch children play soccer, they cluster around the ball. They're more likely to run into one another. And so even soccer as we play it should not be played by any child under 12, 14. Let's wait for their brains to become developed. Just like we've done for car driving. We wait for children to become sufficiently developed before we let them drive. Then we can develop more brain-friendly variants of soccer for children less than 12, where there is less tackle, maybe make the ball bigger and lighter. And again, I always believe in working with the impossible, what people may deem impossible.
Okay, Professor O'Byrne, your reaction to that.
Again, congratulations, Bennet. I mean, it's fantastic to take on the NFL like that and to institute the changes that you have. Soccer is not really the high collision sport that American football is. And while I think most people can see that high impact of American football and in specific instances can cause fairly significant brain injury, it's a little more difficult, I suppose, for me to understand that children playing the ball, who had the ball very little in actual fact, so a rule change like that is not a massive change, but that these sort of heading the ball is going to lead to the same sort of situation, although I know, as you said, it's a range and a spectrum. So I think in terms of soccer, the safety features of it are fairly accepted, and I think the head injury side of it from heading the ball is the evidence is still not conclusive. So I think the way children play football is they don't often head the ball. It doesn't really arise so much. The way head injuries happen in soccer is usually not from heading the ball, but from head injuries, clashing heads or clashing with the goalpost. And again, all of these things are reacting to a concussion that happens, reacting and recognising it and removing people from the dangerous environment, should it exist.
All right, well, rugby has been mentioned a lot, Dr. Rod McLoughlin, and Dr. Omalu's views on it are very strong. He would not have rugby played at all because of its impact. What's your view?
Firstly, like everyone else, I'd like to congratulate him on his work and the focus is put on concussion, the management of concussion, which I think has been really significant. I suppose I'm a little bit stumped here because if I disagree with him, I'll be accused of confirmational intelligence. So I can't win this one unless I agree with you. But I will, maybe before I start, rugby isn't the national sport of the country, it's actually Gaelic. So I think,
it has the heart of the nation.
Which is a acceleration, deceleration sport with contact. Dr. Omalu is one expert in this area. The recent Berlin Consensus Statement, which was written by 36 world experts, specifically stated in the area of CTE that a cause and effect relationship has not been established between CTE and contact sport. So, you know, I respect his opinion, but there are other opinions out there. I think the other thing that concerns me is a little bit what John talked about, is the transfer of evidence. Dr. Omalu is comparing a sport that's very different to rugby. We don't give them helmets. We don't actually say use your head as a tool, which was what happened in American football. And the concussion rates in American football are 14 times the concussion rates of our highest amateur level, the Ulster Bank League. So I think there are very significant differences.
And what about at professional level? What about at professional level?
At professional level, so the latest rates in American football are 32.3 per thousand playing hours, and in the professional game, the RFU figures are 13.
So it's very
I think
similar.
we need to put
It's very similar then.
3 times difference.
13,
13
I just said 30.
32.3. I think the other thing we need to do is put things in perspective. So in our Ulster Bank League, the rate is 2.3 per thousand playing hours. Per thousand playing hours is 750 games. 750 games is a 30-year career in rugby. So that's saying that you'll get 2 concussions over 30 years of playing rugby. I'd prefer it was 0, but we need to put this thing in perspective. In studies of the NHS that have looked at 700,000 attendance casualties and things like that, the risk factors, the top risk factors for a concussion are road traffic accidents, falls, recreational and sporting activities. So we need to look at all these things. So, concussion is part of life.
Yes, but it is a big concern for professional rugby players in Ireland, concussion.
Sorry, I'm not sure when you say it's a big concern. A recent study shows that 90% of them are happy they're concerned about it, but 90% of them are happy with the protocols that have been brought in.
This is the summer edition 2017 of Rugby Players Ireland, which is the professional players magazine. Rugby Players Under Pressure, available member survey 2017, 59% concerned about concussion.
And quote the rest of it, 90% of them are happy with what rugby is doing. Yes, they have concerns. The GPA study,
It's their livelihood, though.
The GA study, along with acquired brain injury Ireland, showed that 58% of players reported having had 1 concussion, 44% having had 2 concussions. This is a sport-wide issue. I think we need to put it in perspective. I mean, people have talked about, the inference was we're trying to hide it. Well, be jabers, if we're trying to hide it, we've done the poorest job ever. We're not trying to hide this. We're acknowledging it. And like all the sports here, we are introducing education, research. We have introduced certain sports have introduced rule changes where appropriate, because player welfare is the #1 concern. So we're like all the sports trying to address this. This is an issue for all sports.
But we watch professional rugby, and you do see players walking out. It's a regular occurrence in professional rugby.
What?
Concussion.
Yeah, it's 11 per 1,000 playing hours. What we have at the moment is every knock in rugby is concussion. So if you were in the media section of the Aviva about 10 years ago and these bangs happened, you'd hear nothing. Now every one of them is a concussion. Everyone's diagnosing it. So that is the perception. If you go looking for finding, it's in all the sports. I see other sports where people look at it and I go, if that was rugby, we would have that recorded as a concussion. That's not happening in other sports.
Do you believe Dr Omalu's findings on CTE?
Do I believe them?
Yes. And the links to American football, for instance?
I'm not an expert in American football and I can't comment on that. What I come back to is what the 36 other experts in the world, supported by many others, they reviewed 3,600 articles on this, and they say that the link hasn't been established. So what do we do?
And who are those 36? Just out of curiosity, who are the 36?
As in name them?
No, but no, that's not. What's their background?
There are renowned neurologists, neurosurgeons. Bob Cantu is one of them. Neurologists, neurosurgeons, sports people. That's what that group is.
And are they a minority group? Fill me in. 36 out of. You know what I mean?
The Berlin Consensus Statement would be the accepted, established writing on concussion in sport. So they're the established group, but that's now we're into confirmational intelligence, aren't we?
Dr. Omalu.
Let me make a comment. When I published our first paper, I studied chronic traumatic encephalopathy in a football player. About 3 of the doctors in that group requested that my paper be retracted, that I was a voodoo doctor, that boxers can suffer brain damage, boxers suffer concussions, but football players do not suffer concussions. These were the same doctors who said that if a player suffers a concussion, that you should send him back to play in the same game, that his outcomes will be better than if you take him out. These are the same doctors on national TV in the United States. One of them was asked 6 times if playing any sport like football causes any brain damage. He said no. Medicine is not an absolute science. The outcome in medicine depends on the assumptions you make and the error rates you want to accept. Medicine is not like physics or mathematics. Do you believe that although we know that asbestos causes cancer, there are still a large number of doctors in the world who would deny that asbestos does not cause cancer? Do you know that climate change exists, but there are a large number of scientists who would deny that climate change does not exist? And what I have always warned, the issue is not about concussions. Because what we have seen just now is what I have seen all over the world. Doctors associated with leagues are very eager to throw out numbers about concussions. The NFL did that last year. They said they reduced the prevalence of concussions from 23% to 12%. But the issue is not about concussions. The issue is about how many times your child receives a blow to the head, or how many times your child is running very fast and somebody pulls him down and the brain suddenly decelerates. It's not about concussions. And again, I'm a Christian. I'm a Roman Catholic by faith. I go down to the basics, the humanity of who we are. Many owners of football teams in America, there are about 32 of them, none of their children plays football. We're dealing with human beings here, please. We're dealing with human beings. Like I said, we all are members of one another. If I look at you, I see myself. You look at me, I want you to see yourself. This is more about money. It's not about love of a game. It's about human life. And like Hippocrates said, as a doctor, first do no harm. Thank you.
Well, I'll invite you to participate. Do you want to reply to that, Rod?
I don't think there is any reply to that. In the sense of we have a difference of opinions, and that's where it stands.
Okay.
I just suppose I would reply to one thing, in the sense of the RFU isn't saying go back and play. The RFU doesn't say put players back on. So there are a number of things that Dr. Omalu said that the RFU has very clearly said don't do. So, and that's what I keep saying. This comparison with the NFL situation, I believe, is unfair. We're keeping an open mind to this. I'm not trying to say we are doing our best on the best evidence we have available. Okay. And we will continue to review it.
I'd like to invite, forgive me now if I, gentleman there, yeah, I won't know everybody by name. George, is it? If I'd seen who it was, you would not have been the one I would have gone to first, George. How are you? George Hook, a broadcaster and former rugby coach and player in this day. George.
Dr. Omalu, thank you for coming, and I apologise for the cheap shots about your knowledge of Gaelic football. My question is to the IRFU. I must say the Royal College of Surgeons must have trawled the whole city to find 5 apologists for their respective sports for the kind of denial and humiliation this man has suffered around the world, and we've tried to do the same thing tonight. My question for the IRFU is this. World Rugby's independent member of their concussion advisory group, Dr. Willie Stewart, professor of neurosurgery at Glasgow University, is considering his membership of that group because, and I quote him exactly, the level of brain injury in rugby union is now unacceptable. The game cannot go on like this. This week, Trinity College Dublin, in a detailed study on concussion on a school in the south of Dublin, said the IRFU's head is in the sand. And the IRFU has no interest in funding or being part of this study. Dr. McLoughlin, I ask you, where's your head?
Thank you, George, for your so elegantly put question. The IRFU is involved in, at the moment, 8 concussion-specific studies and research, and is doing research with UCD, TCD, University of Limerick, University of Cork, National University in Galway, University of Ulster. So we're doing an awful lot of research. We can't support all research. To go back and talk about the specific research you talked about, firstly, I think you misquoted a little bit, that what the study showed was, and it's only over one season, that they had no evidence of any brain damage in this side, which you neglected to say. And the other thing is I don't agree that we put our NSAIDs, because the research group in Trinity that you referred to, I spent 3 hours with them. I gave them advice. They didn't like what we were saying to them in terms of, they just wanted access to our international top-level players. And we said it wasn't practical that players would spend 2 to 4 hours after an international game be flown back from the World Cup, because once you left the World Cup, you couldn't go back. So there were very practical reasons of why we gave our opinion on that. And we're only too happy for any rugby player to be involved in that research if they want. And we've always said that.
Okay, anyone else like to comment? Yes.
I'll give a gentle to George, I think. But why are you focusing on concussion only? Because we've heard in the presentation from Dr Omalu that ongoing rotational and acceleration, deceleration forces are an issue. So what are you doing in the sport of rugby, say in the underage level, to reduce the contact and reduce the ongoing, say, more minor head trauma? And it may not even be contact trauma, it may be contact with other parts of the body that produce those rapid accelerations and decelerations.
I don't think most people realise that actually rugby is introduced in a phased manner. So the game that you see the adults play is not the game that children start play. So there are many adaptations in the rules of the games up to the age of 14. In terms of what are we doing in terms of some of the other things, the IRFU led the world in introducing rule modifications and increased sanctions in 6 laws and 9 areas, specifically to address what you've talked about. Any area that looked at that was seen to be of any danger in the head area. World Rugby followed us 3 or 4 months later. So we're monitoring it all the time. At the moment, we have been involved in a study in a new game called X7s, which is across the pitch sevens. So we're one of 4 nations that has trialled this game. So there are many other forms of rugby, tag, touch, that we drive and whatever, that has limited or no contact. So there are many forms of rugby. And as I say, we're at the forefront all the time, looking at things, researching things, and adapting.
Okay, who has? Gentleman there. I'll try and get to you. It's difficult with getting a microphone in.
Hi, Andrew Cox, medical student. I guess I'm just wondering, Dr. McLoughlin, if you mentioned earlier that the conclusive link between concussion and neurodegenerative effects was inconclusive, right? So if that is true, why did you petition for those kinds of changes to rules and laws?
Okay, firstly, it isn't me saying it.
Sure, but why did the IRFU then petition for that?
So it isn't me saying it. Let us be clear, this is not me or the RFU saying this. This is a group of world experts in the area. So back to your question, why then do we do these things? Because what we're trying to do is make the game as safe as possible. And if there is any potential link, we are making changes to make the game as safe as possible to even minimize anything. As I said, we keep things under review. We don't know where this is going to be in 5 years. But all we can say is that since that group got together 4 years ago, 4 years later they're saying the same thing. So in that 4 years, despite searching, there hasn't been increased evidence for them to change their mind. But what we're doing is doing everything we can to make our game as safe as possible, as long as there is any potential link.
Dr. Omalu?
You know, I have a master's in public health epidemiologist. I'm also a public health physician. And when I travel across the world, I rarely ever attack sports leagues. Sports leagues are corporations. What do corporations do? They make money. They are not there to provide health care to your child or your husband or uncle or brother. So I actually talk to the consumers, especially parents. You shouldn't let a sports league to decide whether your son or daughter should play a sport. It is left for you to decide. It is left for the parents, the consumers, to decide. We are not fools. This has nothing to do with the sports leagues. No, honestly. If a parent says, I wouldn't let my son play, there's nothing the sports league can do to you. So it's the consumer I have problems with, not the sports leagues. I want sports leagues to make as much money as possible. I'm a capitalist. I want them to be very successful, honestly speaking. But on the individual level, as individuals, as the individual consumer, this is your decision to make, not that of the sports league. I have a son. Mark, could you stand up? And I have a daughter. Ashley, could you stand up? So, sit down. You look at these two beautiful children. I'm their father. Their mother is sitting next to them, prima.
They got their mother's looks.
They do, yes. So, I look at my beautiful children, I want to make them to become the best they could become. I don't have to let the sports league decide for me. You decide for yourself. Stop attacking the sports leagues. They have to do what they have to do.
But Dr. Omalu,
it is left for you, the consumer, the individual.
Can I ask you one question about that? The IRFU, the union that runs it, it was an amateur. Rugby only went professional in the last 20 years or whatever. But you do accept the people on that care very much about the health and safety of all the young players, do you?
Could you repeat the question?
No, do you accept the people who nurture the game of rugby, for instance, or Gaelic football or soccer in Ireland? You do accept they care very much about the health and welfare of the young players, do you?
To be honest with you, sincerely, no. And let me tell you why.
That's a big statement.
Yes. The sports leagues, because it's not just unique to rugby. In fact, listening, my experiences here in Ireland is the same experience I've received with the Boxing Association, with the NFL and all contact sports leagues. They're all the same feather. They propose concussion protocols, and they present it to you. Oh, you don't have to worry if your child suffers a concussion. We have a concussion protocol. The concussion protocol does not do anything for your child. That is the fact. If your child has suffered a concussion, the injury has already occurred. So neuropsychiatric testing, concussion protocol does not do anything to cure your child of the concussion. The only thing it does is to prevent your child from suffering another blow to the head and dying on the field, suffering a catastrophic injury, the so-called second impact syndrome. That is all it does. In fact, last year, the Food and Drug Administration of the United States of America stated that you cannot use a neuropsychiatric test to make a diagnosis of concussion. But yet, the sports leagues, they present concussion management protocols and make you believe that that is the answer to the problem. No, it's not. So if they truly cared about the health status of their players, why would they be pushing a lie to you?
What about soccer, where millions of children play soccer worldwide? Tens of millions, maybe hundreds, I don't know the figure. But what about, of those tens of millions who play every year and go through their life unaffected? You accept that as the vast majority?
Of course, in science, the more you discover, the more you realize what you do not know. You never stop research. like in every disease, there is a broad variation of manifestation. If I'm a promiscuous man and I engage in sexual activity with 20 women and I do not contract HIV, it does not mean that promiscuity is not dangerous. If I smoke a stick of cigarette and I don't develop lung cancer, it does not mean that smoking is not dangerous. So what we should do, rather than denying the existence of CTE and traumatic encephalopathy syndromes, no. Let's embrace the truth, put money forward, study it better, and develop a cure. The moment we continue to deny, we will never get to the bottom line. And that is my vision, a cure for crying out loud. We, as human beings, can do it. But as long as we continue to deny it, we ain't gonna find no cure. Can you believe, in spite of all I have done, even moving forward, no sports league has given me a dime to do research? If they were being sincere to embrace the truth, to respect an alternative view, they would have invited me in, giving me money to do my research. Doesn't that bother you that today I'm looking for $10 million to do a research to identify CTE? Let the truth be told, my brothers and sisters. The truth will set us all free.
I will take another couple of comments before. Are you over here? Sorry, this lady here. Sorry. Some people may hear you. We'll take a few more. I'm conscious of your time. We'll just go for another few minutes.
Thank you. Professor Gerald Doyle lectured here in pathology at the Royal College of Surgeons, and he was also head of pathology in Jervis Street Hospital, Ireland's first charitable hospital. And he's quoted in the yearbook here saying that forensic pathology is often the result of heroic surgery. The hero is the patient. And he used to also say that forensic pathology is the closest we get to heaven on earth, the ultimate truth. Do you think that modern science and medicine meets this brief, and that others deny it for financial gain?
Okay, you've all watched the movie Concussion, right? Forensic pathology is a very deep science, because it's a science at the interface with humanity. When you study death and the science of death, you cannot look away from the truth. It draws and binds you to the truth, because it's more than just science. Forensic pathology reminds you of your mortality. We all must die. And forensic pathology reminds you that we all are members of one another. That whatever we do, even to one of us, we do to all of us. And that is why, in spite of me not wanting this, like I have said, I wish I never met Mike Webster, and I mean it. I would have loved to spend time with my beautiful family, away from all this nonsense, and be left alone. But it fell upon me. And I realized there is only one truth. Truth doesn't have a side or a perspective or perspective, and there is no alternative truth, no matter what Donald Trump may tell you. So I've decided to embrace that truth, no matter what the consequences may be for me. But I continue to be vindicated. If with all my endeavors, I can save only one child from suffering brain damage in his life, I would die happy. Does that make sense? Thank you.
Now, we have a doctor here who soldiered with the Irish Olympic team for many Olympiads.
Thank you, Dr. Omalu. I also was in UC Davis for 4 years, so I know it well.
you.
The question I want to ask you is that you're a forensic neurologist or neuropathologist, and I know you've spoken about PET scans, CTs, and MRIs. But as a physician, has anyone, yourself or others, gone back further to do biochemical tests, either in the urine, in the blood, or in the spinal fluid, that may be able to give us a minimal, mild, moderate, or severe idea of where an athlete who may have had a concussion or may have just had routine tests to show that they've had too many traumatic injuries, that would then tell us that that group of people should definitely not be exposed to the possibility of second syndromes?
Yes, as we speak, I'm very aware of private corporations who are looking at a combination of biochemical markers using computational derivative analysis to come up with a certain type of index, but we haven't gotten there yet. As you may know, the brain is a very elusive organ. But hopefully they are looking at markers for chronic inflammatory changes in the brain. But we've not reached at any point whereby some test would be introduced into the market. But I've attended conferences, I've advised different corporations, so they are working on it. Look at the problem we had. Remember, between 2002 and 2012, for 10 years, the sports industry was denying CTE, and we lost time. So it was only in 2012, for the first time, they recognized it. But remember, my brothers and sisters, in spite of the NFL denying CTE, they still settled to the tune of $1 billion. So you see the irony here. If you're settling players for suffering brain damage, why would you continue to deny that high-impact, high-contact sport causes brain damage? So we lost time. And then what happens again, like we have seen with industries, they want to manipulate the science. And they select the doctors they fund to suggest there is no link. Any doctor who will suggest there is no link between a blow to the head and brain damage, I don't know what you call that doctor. Am I making sense? Maybe you're calling me a Nigerian doctor because Nigeria is the most corrupt country in the world. That was why I ran away from Nigeria. It is basic common sense. You don't have to be a doctor to figure that out. Does that make sense? Yes. Thank you so much.
Okay. Would any of our panel like to have any closing remarks?
I suppose just to pick up on that last comment, we aren't suggesting that there isn't a connection between brain trauma. What I talked about, that these experts talked about, was a connection with CTE. That's a very different thing. I think the other thing is the IRFU are involved in research looking at blood biomarkers and that sort of thing.
Actually, that is not true. CTE, like I said in my talk, again, look at the marketing gimmick. They want to make it about CTE. Because in making it about CTE, they make it about me, the African doctor that should not be trusted. That is what is going on here. I've been doing this now for almost 20 years. It's not about CTE. Like that paper that I showed you is about the traumatic encephalopathy syndromes. If you accept that rugby causes a concussion, okay, think about it. If you accept that rugby causes concussions, you are pretty much accepting that rugby causes brain damage, whether it's CTE or not. Don't make it about CTE. Concussion is a traumatic encephalopathy, it's brain damage. So if rugby causes a concussion, you cannot deny that rugby doesn't cause brain damage, because guess what? It is a proven fact of science that concussions cause permanent brain damage. Like we say in my country, kachineke mezioku, meaning cure ED. My sister knows that.
All right, well, look, it's been hugely informative and interesting. I'd like to thank the panel, Bernard Jackman, Dr. Pat O'Neill, Dr. Rod McLoughlin, Aisling Daly, Professor John O'Byrne, and our special guest, Dr. Bennet Omalu. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for watching online.
you.